has been about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, early in Donald Trump's presidency, so probably the first presidency, 45, probably 6 years ago. She spoke. She was the keynote speaker, and I was a state committee man at the time, so I was part of the internal welcoming committee, and I got to meet her one on one or one with about five or six of us. And she's everything she appears to be. She was very cordial, extremely knowledgeable, bright. She gave a great talk. So I think it's an interesting choice. And, what's interesting here to me is beyond just her choice is how the media always spins some of this stuff. And it says here, and I'm reading from an AP article, President Donald Trump said Thursday that he is naming Fox News host Jeanine Pirro, a former county prosecutor and elected judge, to be the top federal prosecutor for the nation's capital. I think that's interesting. And they always blast Trump and mock Fox because several people in his administration have ties to Fox, right? Fox News and all. And I can understand that is maybe a legitimate situation. But, if you look on the left side of it, they always have these people like Jen Psaki have moved from the public sector to the private sector and use their position to gain favor and make a bigger contract with some type of news like MSNBC or CNN, that type of thing. Well, if you think about it, the flip side of that, the people that were on Fox actually gave up, when you talk about financial, they gave up a lucrative career to go serve in public. All of these people, like, the judge made more money on her show like The Five and others than she ever will serving as a judge, even at the federal level. Now, can she parlay that back into even more money when her term of service is over? Sure. But Pete Hegseth and all that, Sean Duffy, the members of the cabinet that were prominent on Fox News, they're making far less money. They're taking a tremendous pay cut to actually be in public service, but they're criticized for moving to private to public, but it's never the other way around. So it's just kind of interesting. But President Trump wrote in a statement about his appointment, he said, Jeanine, talking about the judge, is incredibly well qualified for this position and is considered one of the top district attorneys in the history of the state of New York. She is in a class by herself. Now, she's been a friend and colleague, if you will, of the president, Donald Trump, for many, many years, going way back to their ties in New York and all. So she's probably, of all the people that are in his administration, she may be the closest in a personal relationship with the president. And she's been very open about that in the past, and so has the president. But I'm wondering, he picked her to be the DC head. Now, there's reasons that that seat became open. The original gentleman that was supposed to do it, and his name I did not write down, but they withdrew his name because some Republicans apparently on the Senate side said that they didn't want to confirm him. One in particular that they haven't actually named as of yet, but apparently this lawyer was a lawyer from some of the January 6 people that were prosecuted, and they didn't want to cloud the issue. And I certainly can understand that because it is all politics all the time in D.C. So Judge Jeanine Pirro is going to be the choice. Now, she's pretty hard-nosed in the past, and certainly in her public life, on her position on Fox, she's very hard line. I wonder if she's going to be as hard line as a prosecutor. And without knowing exactly what cases are going to come up, I can't specifically comment on that aspect of it. But I'm wondering if anybody up there should be nervous about the fact that Jeanine is the person that is going to be up there. Some of these people that clearly use their position from FBI to Department of Justice to even Treasury and all that, use their positions under Biden to actually weaponize government against their enemies and political enemies, which they accuse Donald Trump of. That's one thing about the left. whatever they accuse you of doing, they're already doing it. That seems to be pretty evident. But I wonder if anybody is getting nervous about that. All right, so if you're just joining us, Ted is on walkabout at the moment. He's traveling. We're expecting him to get back on here any moment now. So we're going to go ahead and take our first and only commercial break here while we wait on Ted. Check it out. Please, you see that little moniker there on the side of the screen. It says advertise with us, contact Freddie. If you'd like to be a sponsor of our show, and we'd love to have you, please contact that number and we'll get you set up. We'd appreciate it if you would patronize our sponsors, and we thank our sponsors because without them, none of this would be possible. We'll be right back.
Although the owner of Lewis Oil Company maintains she is 29, Lewis Oil turns 60 years old in June. Chevron would like to recognize the North Florida second-generation family-owned business, celebrating its growth and staying power. Lewis Oil Company maintains significant on-hand supplies, strategically located fuel depots, a delivery fleet, on-site service, fuel card locks, and convenience stores. Lewis Oil Company understands its responsibility in the local economy by providing service and delivery on demand and in crisis. As a first responder for 18 Florida counties and the Southeast from Texas to Virginia, we are proud of this rare accomplishment. Lewis Oil delivers.
This is Ward Scott, and I want to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. The Ward Scott Files premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care.
Meldon Law, the only official injury partner of the Florida Gators.
The Ward Scott Files Gold sponsors are Lewis Oil Company,
Shoot GTR,
On the Spot Dry Cleaners, R&R Construction, and Style Cuts. If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, you can visit our website, www.wardscottfiles.com, and click on the Advertise Here banner on the right side of the page, or call my friend Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you to all the great businesses that support the Ward Scott Files. And remember, if you like the show, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. May God have mercy on your soul.
Or that very much surprises me that you've never been tased.
You can't handle the truth!
All bees poop.
A warthog. He's going to come up the steps. Here he comes. Oh my goodness, and he's huge. Hello, boy. Wonder if we can pet him. Hi, boy.
Can we touch him? No, don't.
Help me! Help! Help!
And we're back. We appreciate you patronizing our sponsors. That I said, if you'd like to become one, just look at that little moniker that appears on your screen, says advertise with us, contact Freddie, call that number, and we'd love to have you. Well, we went to commercial break. Ted Yoho, welcome to our Pirate Podcast, by the way. If you're just tuning in, I'm the old salty dog, John Martin. We call this our Pirate Podcast, and all are welcome. My captain of the Pirate Podcast, Ted Yoho, is traveling right now, and we're hoping he'll be able to phone back in shortly. But if not, I will endeavor to steer the ship by myself with, of course, your help. All right, we're going to talk about another big piece of news that broke yesterday was Donald Trump's first trade deal. His first trade deal. He's been knocked hard about the tariffs and all and everything. And the craziest part about it is everybody on the left used to be all about tariffs and taxes and all that kind of stuff. And now, there's countless videos of people from Barack Obama to Nancy Pelosi to even Hakeem Jeffries talking about the need for tariffs and all that. But if Donald Trump is for it, then it's got to be, out of the question. But Donald Trump signed the first trade deal yesterday, and the first person or first country to come forward with a new trade deal is the United Kingdom, jolly old England. And I'm reading to you a little bit from a Washington Examiner article. The first big trade agreement since Liberation Day, of course, that's what Donald Trump named it the day he announced all the tariffs, came yesterday with President Donald Trump celebrating a deal with the United Kingdom that leaders from each nation say will be beneficial for their citizens. So England is the first. I'm not surprised. I don't think anybody should really be surprised by that. But we know, chime in on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever you're watching our show, and make your comments, and I'll try to, respond to them. But England is the first. The complete details of it, are still trying to be worked out. But essentially, we're going to keep the same 10% across the board tariff that Donald Trump has said he's levying on everybody is going to remain, with a few exceptions. Now, one thing about this deal, like that 10%, I think that it's reasonable to conclude that this first deal will be essentially a template, if you will, for future deals. Now, obviously, there are going to be certain countries, England probably being right at the top of that list. It's been one of our oldest friends and allies and trade partners. I'm not saying that China's going to get the same deal, but there's going to be certain levels that people are going to expect. But from what I recall, the biggest couple of big things is the market is going to be more open for both exchanges of agriculture, for like our beef to go over there, for some of their products to come over here. The natural gas that we're going to be able to sell to them is going to be wide open. There's going to be, I think, no tariffs on that, or very little on England's side. They roughly produce about 100,000 cars. I'm assuming Jaguar, stuff like that we purchase over here. And the tariff is going to be fairly low on the first 100,000, which from my sources tells me is about what they produce anyway. And one of the biggest aspects, now there's still some things to work out, but one of the biggest aspects has to do with jet airliner engines. I didn't really realize this, but most of like Boeing, most of the jet is built right here in the United States of America. All of it is pretty well assembled, but we get parts for engines and stuff like that from England, and that's going to be zero tariff. And apparently that's a pretty big deal. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen moving forward. Of course, this weekend in Europe, I believe in Sweden or maybe Switzerland, I can't remember, it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to be part of it. But we have representatives from our government that I guess our Bessett, he's going to be meeting with some of his counterparts from China. And I think on Saturday, they're supposed to be talking about the parameters of an agreement, the details. And then on Sunday, depending on what those details are, they're going to talk more specifically. I think this is just the first start of an agreement. I wouldn't put too much into the fact that England is, that what's in their tariff negotiation, because I think China is going to be a unique case, period. It looks like we've got Ted back on here. Ted, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine, and I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, well, we went ahead and took the break while you were out, and we just came back starting to talk about the initial agreement with UK, the first such agreement with any of our potential trading partners. And I just go ahead and chime in what you think about it, because what I was talking about was a few of the details. There's still some to be worked out. I said I wasn't surprised that the UK was the first, and this could be a template for some aspects of it. But what are your thoughts in general about this latest announcement?
No, I think it's a great announcement. And like you said, it's the first step. And this is something we had anticipated. He threw out all these tariffs, and, the left and, the people that aren't supportive of this administration, they all want to tell everybody how bad it is. But it's the beginning of the negotiations. And as you said, England's the first one to step up. They're working out a deal. The details will come, but it'll set the template for the other countries to come in. And you were talking about Boeing and the auto part or the plane parts and all that. This is a big win for the industry because China has said that no more Boeing aircrafts, which is a huge market. But then you see England and these other countries, they will step up and follow this. And this is why this is important to keep these organizations like Boeing or these manufacturers like Boeing. Boeing is integral in our defense makeup of our aircrafts and all that in the country, along with all the other big companies like Northrop and those big companies like that. So we've got to keep that mechanism going. And this is going to be a transition. It'll be a little bit rocky, but I think you'll come out stronger. The important thing is we're divesting from China, and we're going to balance the trade deficit that we've had. And I think you may not see it today, next week, but future generations will be well served for what's going on right now.
Yeah, I was reading from an AP story here, so I want to continue on because this part I find a bit fascinating. People may recall that Britain famously left the EU in 2016, just before Donald Trump actually, I believe, got elected, a process known as Brexit, which Trump has compared to his own surprise election later in the same year. It says, for now, the UK will face a 10% tariff for most exports to the US, while EU countries face a 20% tariff, giving their former colleagues a major advantage. So, how do you see this playing out to the rest of the EU and Western Europe? Because I think it is interesting that they're going to maintain, at least for now, the 20% tariffs on the rest of the EU, but Britain gets this special deal. I think that is pretty interesting.
Well, I think it is. I think it's the shot across the bow that we're serious about what we're doing. And I think you'll see these other other nations of the EU say, you know what, we're going to sit and watch for a little bit, but others are going to come on, and there'll be some that are going to be reluctant. You're going to see the Baltic countries, Latvia and all those, you're going to see those come on a little bit quicker, I predict. Maybe France will be a little bit hesitant. Germany, maybe a little bit, but our economies are so entwined, they really don't have an option. What's their other option? To get stronger into China, that's a non-starter for several reasons. One, the more they get involved with China, the more their security apparatus gets involved with China, and more importantly, the more China gets involved in theirs. And the world is splitting. There's a dichotomy. You've got Western ideologies that are built on constitutional republics or nations that have constitutions that kind of follow the same laws that we do and the same beliefs, or you have Chinese Communist Party ideology. And I don't know anybody in a free society that wants that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that part shakes out. I mentioned right before you came back on that we're having some meetings with China. I believe it's in Switzerland, maybe Sweden. I couldn't remember, but over the weekend, and it's kind of a talk to start a talk. And obviously, China and the U.S. relationship is the big deal in all of this stuff. But I think I hear so much criticism of the president talking about we might have shortages of this and that, and all of that could certainly be true. But China is in a much more precarious situation than we are. They definitely, now don't get me wrong, we need products that we've allowed China to dominate now. We definitely need them. But China, if they were totally cut off from the United States, you could be talking about a revolution over there, because my understanding is that China's economy is pretty much teetering on the brink right now.
Well, it's amazing because you can get an indication of that by looking at the data that used to be available, but they cut off about a year and a half ago. The amount of employment, their GDP, housing, all that stuff. You can't even get that information anymore. And so it tells you that they're guarding that very, very strongly. We just know from their involvement around the world that they're overextended real estate wise. Their Belt and Road Initiative which is to build the ancient Silk Road trades that they had. They've extended into over 140 countries or 120 countries. They're over $1 trillion in debt in those countries. And a lot of those countries are developing countries. They can't afford to pay them back. So they have that big real estate bubble over there. And then their population is aging. The reports we get is their youth unemployment is well over 20%. And there's a lot of unrest in China. And then she's got to fight with the Politburo, which is a communist party. And he has been eliminating anybody that seems to be rising up in ranks. And we've seen that live on TV when they got rid of their defense minister. And I don't know if you remember, they came and tapped the guy on the shoulder and he looked around and they said, "Come with me." And that's the last anybody heard of the guy.
Yeah, they pulled him right out of kind of a public meeting.
Yeah.
Certainly well.
And so they do have problems. But in the meantime, I just got back from DC with the changes we're having in our foreign policy. You know, when you look at USAID, and I'm in agreement, that organization did so much bad stuff that the only way you could fix it is to burn it down. But some of the stuff they did as far as soft diplomacy, China is stepping in there. And this is where it's dangerous. If you look at the pharmaceutical trade, we had a lot of talks on the pharmaceutical trade last week with people like United States Pharmacopoeia, who sets the gold standard for how medicines are made. They were saying that as we're pulling out with the USAID workers, who are our boots on the ground, the ones that were doing good work, that China is coming in there saying, "See, you can't trust the Americans. They're not going to be here long term. And we want to get engaged with you in the pharmaceutical industry in your country, and we will set the standards." Their standards are terrible. And we can talk about that on another show. And so this is where they are rapidly trying to displace us, where we've allowed it to happen. We need to come back stronger with programs that are helping countries build their economies, but we want them efficient and we want them effective. And the whole point is to create an economy in those countries where we develop trade with them back and forth.
Yeah, so I would say this is a great start with the UK coming on as the first trading partner.
It really is. You know, you're getting a paradigm shift here in the trade imbalance that we've had for so long, and it had to start somewhere.
Yeah, and like you've heard me say before, with the Democrats, I was talking about before you came back on how they were all for tariffs and that type of thing, and they were supposedly for protecting the American worker and everything else, which, the trade unions are now saying that, like, the auto workers are all about Donald Trump because these tariffs are going to help them, the steel workers. So, it's amazing to me how they've kind of flipped that a bit, but it's a great start. What are your who do you think is going to be next in line on this? Because everybody's talking about what's going to be next, and what do you think is going to, if you had to predict, what's the next?
Well, before we go in there, you just brought up the trade unions, how they're standing behind Trump because they're creating the manufacturing jobs, they're creating the Joe Lunchbox jobs, they're creating the jobs that you and I have done. I've always done manual labor, from construction, farm work. As a veterinarian working on the farm, I can relate to that. The people that are supporting the likes of Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, AOC are the service employees trade unions. Those are the government jobs. Those are the ones that, they get 3 months off now, paid maternity leave, paternity leave. And those aren't the unions supporting the guy out there in the factory. As far as who's going to be next in line, I think you're going to see countries. I think you'll see Germany probably come along. I think you'll see the Asian countries are going to come along in a big way. They are so dependent on security from the United States, and we're talking Japan, South Korea, and that by default brings in Taiwan, that you'll see trade deals being worked out. You look at the largest manufacturing company in South Korea, it's SK Steel. They just did a battery plant in Georgia, $6 billion investment. They want to be able to manufacture here so they're not affected by tariffs. TSMC, the Taiwan semiconductor, has done another big deal in Arizona, another $1 billion deal, and they've already had I think they're up to about $2 billion investment in America. And this is vital for national security because of the chips that they make are the most high quality anywhere in the world. And that industry is moving to America. So this is a good thing.
Yeah, I've been watching an interesting commercial pop up on TV from Mercedes-Benz. I don't know if you've seen it, but they show like the stadium named after them in Atlanta and that kind of thing. And the whole thrust of their advertisement is that they're no longer a German-only company, that they're not selling stuff to Americans. They are part of America now, which I find
they really are.
And it's true. I mean, but it's kind of fascinating that everybody from the Catholic Church now to the Germans want to claim some aspects of being part of America. So it's America's
well, they really
back,
do
baby.
Well, and it's like Trump said, and I got so jazzed when he said this in his victory speech, the golden age of America is beginning. And if you take that to heart, you know, you can project 50 years down the road. If we get this paradigm shift of manufacturing coming back here, and I've had some critics say, well, it will never get the factory jobs because our youth won't want to work into a factory. I disagree with that. I think if those kind of jobs are here, I think you're going to see that get filled real quickly. And when you add to that what we're doing on immigration, we're getting away from the illegal influx invasion we've had, and then we'll go back to a law and order way for people to come in that have permission to be in this country. They're going to love working here. Our youth is going to love working here. And, you know, as I raised my children, there was a point in time when they said, I don't want to go to college. I said, I don't care if you go to college. It's going to matter more to you later down in life than it will to me. I went to college and I took advantage of the education I got. There's kids out there that don't want to go to college. And I think that's a great opportunity to be the plumber, the electrician, air conditioning person, the mechanic. Those are the jobs they're great paying jobs. You set your own schedules a lot of times. And I think you're going to see a revitalization of that.
Yeah, well, when you see some of the crap that's happening on some of these colleges, like what just happened in Columbia, you couldn't blame everybody saying, I don't want to be any part of that. But, you know, while you were talking there, a thought just occurred to me that there seems to be in this, the voting shows it. There's an interesting, because usually when you talk about generations, it's more like a 20-year kind of gap.
Right.
But there's a gap between like 18 to 21 or 2-year-olds and 23 or 4 to 30-year-olds. The ones from like, you know, in their mid to upper 20s to 30 are like super progressive. But the ones that are like 22 and below are becoming more and more conservative, which is fascinating. And I really believe that part of it is that social media, like what we're on now, is no longer censoring as much, and they're getting more factual stuff and seeing a different side. It's not one side fits all. And I think they're wanting a piece of the American dream, and they realize they got to work for it.
Well, you know, that's an interesting topic. We could do a whole show on that. You think of the 60s, you know, I grew up in the 60s, the Vietnam and all that. We saw the hippies and that, and the psychedelic movement and all that. I was at that age where I could have gone into that, but then I also looked at them like, those aren't people I want to be around. And I think if you look at today's younger generation who looked at that generation before them, or the ones that maybe 10 years before that, and they hear them in these, whatever rally they had, and they stand up to the mic and they say, identify as he, she, they, them. And the person talking to them goes, he, she, they, them. How do you feel about this? Well, he, she, they, them says this. And this younger generation's looking at them like, these people are confused. And it's like the Pope said, the new Pope, there's two genders. You know, this gender ideology and confusion we're going through comes back to, we got to stick, there are two genders. And I think God created those. He didn't say that. I threw that in there.
Well, we're going to move on to this other story that I didn't pull this out of any. This I just kind of pulled out of my own sphere. So to speak.
Don't tell where you pulled it out, John.
Yeah, but Biden is back, baby. Biden is back. I don't know if you've seen this, but Joe did 2 interviews this past week. The first one he did was on the BBC, which is interesting.
I watched that. Yeah.
Yeah, Gavin Newsom actually did one on the BBC as well just before Biden did it. And interesting about the BBC. And then we're going to play you a little snippet of it in a minute. But then Dr. Jill and Joe did The View yesterday, and I watched all of that. As I say, my public service, I watch what you don't, so you don't have to.
I tell you what, I watched the first 10 minutes, or about 10 minutes. I'm like, I can't watch this stuff. Before you go on,
you went on the BBC to start with. Let's start.
Well, I wanted to go back to the BBC. I've been on there several times in my early career, and then the last time I went on there, they had me on there, and they didn't tell me that they had this real liberal guest that just attacked me the whole time. And ever since BBC has called me to do an interview, I don't even take their call anymore. I said, no, you guys are left-wing radical, and I want nothing to do with you. So that explains why Gavin Newsom and Joe Biden are on there.
I hear you. Well, I want to play a brief snippet of Joe Biden on the BBC. And it kind of, even though the interview was probably a half hour, it kind of gives you a sense of how it went. Let's check it out and we'll come back and talk about it.
I love the way he looks in the beginning.
I had become what we had set out to do. No one thought we could do. And become so successful in our agenda, it was hard to say, no, I'm going to stop now. I meant what I said when I started, that I think I'm prepared to hand this to the next generation. It's a transition government. But things move so quickly that it made it difficult to walk away, and it was
I mean, the man is delusional. I hate to say it, but he's literally telling you that that he admits that he was originally going to be kind of a one-term president, a transitional, whatever you call it. But that the reason he didn't drop out sooner is things were going so well and they were moving so quickly on this agenda and getting so much done that he just couldn't walk away because things were going so well. He may be the only person, including even Democrats, that think that.
It really is. All you got to do is look at the polling for the Democratic Party. He did well. We should keep him around. And I think it should be a constant reminder of how well he did. It's laughable that he could talk about how well he did. You look at the borders, you look at the sociology split in this country. You look at his Department of Defense versus those pictures you showed, Pete Hegseth and some of the other people. It's just the direction that they wanted to take America in was not the direction that the American people wanted to. And I love how he says the American people were against a female presidential candidate. That's what it was. It had nothing to do with it. I mean, we would vote for a female candidate, with the right one. I wouldn't have any problems with that. And for them to use it, and this is how they're so good at divided politics, but they're stuck in that trap. And we can talk about Bernie and AOC here in a minute if we have time, or at the end.
Well, I'm actually hoping that the first actual elected female president is Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
I tell you what.
That's my hope right there.
I'm
a
sharp
Sarah Huckabee
lady.
fan, baby.
Yeah, me too.
But so I want to give kind of a warning, to people. I'm about to play about a minute clip from The View. So if you want to turn away, I certainly understand. But we're going to play this and then we'll come back and talk. This is Joe and Dr. Jill on The View. Check it out.
A situation where we found ourselves unable to deal with a lot of just basic issues, and which I won't go into in the interest of time. And so we went to work, and we got it done. And one of the things Alyssa,
one of the things I think is that the people who wrote those books were not in the White House with us. And they didn't see how hard Joe worked every single day. I mean, he'd get up, he'd put in a full day, and then at night I'd be in bed, reading my book, and he was still on the phone, reading his briefings, working with staff. I mean, it was nonstop. It's the White House, being president is not like a job. It's a lifestyle. It's a life that you live. You live it 24 hours a day. That phone can ring at 11 o'clock at night or 2 in the morning. It's constant. You never leave it. And Joe worked really hard. I think he was a great president. And if you look at things today, give me Joe Biden any time.
Jill to the rescue, Dr. Jill, and she's not a medical doctor, but she certainly needs to be one for her husband. But there's a part that I didn't want people to miss, that it kind of explains a lot to me, because people say, Jill and the Bidens are cruel to keep marching this guy out there. But she talks about being in the White House, the presidency is a lifestyle. I think that's a very important word, because I think she was in love with the lifestyle that Biden being hooked up with him
afforded her,
enables her. And I think that's something that people shouldn't miss. That's why they keep pushing him out there. It's about the lifestyle.
It really is. And she was one that I've never heard another first lady talk about that. And she lived that. I mean, she was just happy to be there. And of course, if I was married to him, I'd be happy to be anywhere but with him.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that was a negative. I don't want to get us booted off.
Well, if you're thinking about being married to Joe Biden, that's a whole nother episode. But
I don't want to go there.
Yeah. But she talks about how hard he works, how hard does anybody really believe that she was in bed reading a book and Joe was on the phone taking that 3 o'clock phone call or whatever, and he was working? I mean, can anyone possibly believe that?
No,
I don't.
Well, yeah, the people on the View and their audience. You've got that other clip or snippet, right? That little short one.
So the View, the whole aspect of the View, kind of a theme that ran through the whole episode yesterday, was that basically Biden had done a great job, and if it wasn't for just one debate, that he would have been the president and all of that. And who else must think that is Jill Biden herself, because I want to play this. This was a video that was taken at the first event right after Biden's debate, where she admits on The View that she told him, you really screwed that up. But the very first event they go to, check this out. This is Jill Biden. This is a blast from the recent past.
You knew all the facts. And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do? Lied! Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the facts.
You answered every question, Joe. I mean, you did great. You answered every question. I mean, a couple of the questions he answered with like that, but she literally has the cojones to say, you answered every question. It's amazing.
You know what it reminds me of is my grandkids, when you have your little daughter or your little granddaughter that goes to the bathroom on the big toilet, and just say, Joey, did you go to the bathroom all by yourself? You did so good. Or they ate all their vegetables. You say, I am so proud of you. You ate all your peas and carrots.
Yeah, and so when I was rewatching that video yesterday, getting ready for the show, I thought about one we played just a week or so ago, where you had Pocahontas, as the president likes to call her, Elizabeth Warren, on a podcast, and I got to give the guy some credit for doing it. When he asked her, did she ever see that guy, basically Joe and Biden, and she said, and she literally said, well, when I went to see him, he was standing in the Oval Office, and the guy interrupted her and said, just standing is not actually a compliment. I mean,
I think that's enough said. I mean, you don't need to say any more about that. Keep in mind, the progressive left, the Socialist Democrat Communist Party, the Bernie Sanders, the AOC, they are going around the nation promoting the policies that Biden thinks he did so well. They're the ones going around. They don't see what they did, how offensive it was to the normal American working person out there. And so they go around and they're telling this. So anybody thinking about supporting them, look at what they are supporting. And it's the demise of America. It's the socialization of America that will lead into communism. And it's just been repeated throughout history. And we have to stay vigilant because we were one election away. Had they gotten in, this country would have changed forever. It would have been a long time before we got back to the country that we all fight for.
Yeah, well, there's two political figures that the Democratic Party is really worried about beyond Donald Trump, obviously. And one is they want to basically us to forget that Joe Biden was ever president. They just want him. They kind of just want him to go off in the sunset. They're willing to give him a $30 million book deal. I don't know if you saw that, but they want him to just ride off and forget that he ever was president. And Fetterman, we talked a little bit about it. Yeah, Fetterman, they want him to just go. They want him to be, he's mentally ill. So they don't question Joe Biden when he's literally going blah, 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 blah when he was president. But now Fetterman is unfit mentally for office because he committed 3 cardinal sins, in my opinion.
Right.
One, he met with the president before he was inaugurated down in Mar-a-Lago. That's a sin. Then he questioned the progressive left and some of their cockamamie ideas. And the worst thing he possibly could do, he stood for Israel, unequivocally.
Unwavering. Yep.
Unwavering for them. And for that, he is mentally deranged. And, when he literally opened up a debate with Dr. Oz, we talked about it by saying, "Good night, everybody." They had no problem. But so they want those two political figures to go away. It's just fascinating to me.
Well, this is how dangerous, again, that whole movement of the Sanders and the AOC, they all knew this. They knew this was going on with Biden, but yet, especially AOC, she stuck with him to the very end. She was one of the last people saying, "Oh, he's good. He's as sharp as ever." And they know it's not true. Now, you look at who's coming up on the stage for the next election, the presidential. It's that Governor Pritzker out of Illinois, Pritzker. He is a hardcore liberal left. And keep in mind, he's a billionaire. He's an oligarchy, but they're going to support him. I want to know what they're going to do, on another path here. Elon Musk is stepping down. If he steps down, who's going to be their whipping post? Who are they going to beat up on? He's gone. He's out of the scene. But now they got Pritzker, and they're going to tell you how great he is. Keep in mind, the Pritzkers are the ones they had their grandfathers and uncles started the Hyatt hotel chain. But the Pritzker family, the Governor Pritzker's sister was in the Obama administration. His other brother is a transgender, putting millions and millions, if not billions, into this whole transgender movement. And it started back in the 90s. And these are the people that want to get back in office. And those are the ones that got run out of office.
Yeah, it's a separate topic, but it's amazing to me how all these like Hollywood and leftist elites, it's like all of the kids are like transitioning. It's weird. But I will say this about Pritzker. He does have a successful president that he could model his campaign on, and that would be Taft, where they carried him around on a door because he was so huge. So I can see Pritzker. They'll have to carry him around like that. Well, that's going to do it for our show, Ted. I hope you have safe travels. Any parting words for our audience?
No, I just appreciate everybody being on. I apologize for the disruption I've caused again. I'm going to be traveling for the next 2.5 weeks. We'll check in remotely, but stay vigilant because what we're hearing in D.C. is there's this whole push to underride Trump on every avenue he's going in, whether it's on trade, whether it's on defense, whether it's on the economy. And they're going to throw this negative out there as they overlooked what happened in the previous administration. So we just need to stay vigilant. We appreciate you tuning in and following us. Share us with your friends and family and people you don't know.
Well, safe travels. Bring me back a t-shirt.
You
Peace
betcha, man.
out.
Y'all take care. See you later.